Well, it's hard to summarize my whole experience of building a tech startup as a high schooler, but I'm going to try my best to highlight the key lessons learned from each of the 6 stages of the journey, from forming the idea to getting traction, as well as take a few minutes at the end to talk about what it's like exactly balancing running a startup with high school. Just starting out at ground zero, the idea. I've had a few underclassmen come up to me and ask, how do you come up with the idea for your company? And it's a very basic, simple question that makes sense. And in my opinion, it's very intuitive. The best way I found was just looking for the pain points in your life. Like, for example, is it difficult to find carpools in your area? Is it hard to organize all of your class notes? Just take a step back and just evaluate your day-to-day life and see what's wrong and think about how you could potentially fix it. In my case, whenever I didn't understand a homework problem, this was freshman year geometry, I was struggling with the subject. Whenever I didn't understand something, I'd go on Facebook and I'd hit up my close friend Millen, who is one of the smartest kids in my grade, and ask him, how do you do this problem? Like, I can't get it. Or can you explain this particular concept to me? I'm sure many of you guys can relate to the situation. It's late nights on Facebook. And keep in mind, I'm at public school at the time, so there aren't like teacher extra help sessions like we have here at Harker. And so anyways, I'd message Millen. We'd get on a Skype call. We'd get on a Facebook Messenger. And even then, it was really hard for him to communicate like his explanations to me. And I just thought, why can't there be a way to do this more easier? And if you watch Sal Khan's TED video, you might remember that he was having a hard time teaching his cousin online as well before he started Khan Academy, which prompted him to start Khan Academy out of that pain point. So this experience, trying to learn from my friends online, on Facebook, and on Skype, and just how clumsy and awkward it was, that's what really prompted me to take a step back and say, hey, what can I do to fix this? And my idea for Stoodle stemmed from this experience. And so this ties really well into my second point of knowing the space that your idea is in really well. If you've experienced a pain point, the chances that you'd probably know what would be needed to fix it is very high because you're personally experiencing that problem day in and day out of your lives. And in my case, I was a high school sophomore when I started Stoodle. And so it really made a lot of sense for me to try to create an educational tool that students like myself could use every day. If you pick an idea in a space that you know nothing about, like let's say you're trying to start the next hottest payments company, whether it's like the next PayPal or the next Square, but you're a high school student who knows nothing about the payments industry or just anything about how that complex ecosystem works, that's not a very good place to be in, especially if it's your first company. You also won't have much credibility when you go out and pitch your company to other people, especially adults. And it was actually a pretty interesting situation at Stoodle because whenever we had meetings with adults, we as teenagers were always treated as the experts in the room because our startup was in the K-12 education space, and we had been living under that industry for like the past decade as students ourselves. So we knew the space even better than some of the adults did, and that was a pretty cool space to be in. So for example, if you're big into robotics at school and you want to do a hardware startup, that's great. If you love shopping online, you're a big-time online shopper, and you want to start an e-commerce company, that's perfect. Just know your space, and it'll really help you make your product a lot better, as well as give you a lot of credibility when you're going out and dealing with adults in the real world. And when you do form your idea, make sure it's something that you'll not eventually get tired of or bored of. You want something that you know will keep you excited even 3 years down the road. Because you need to think of startups as more of a marathon than a sprint. You're in it for the long term. You want to make sure that you're going to go in with this idea over the long run. So now moving on to the second stage of forming the team around the idea. The first thing you should realize is that you need a team. You can't do it alone. Startups aren't really solo projects that can be completed in a few months. It's a tiring, multi-year journey up like a massive mountain, and it's in your startup's best interest to have like-minded, passionate people around you for support and encouragement. Not to mention, it's a lot more fun too. It's pretty boring if you're doing it all by yourself. Stoodle really wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my co-founders, Divya, Hans, and Simmer. And now this just begs the question, what do you look for in the team? When you're trying to put together a great team together, how do you know who to identify, who to put together? And the first step, I think, is to do an honest self-evaluation of yourself and the skills you possess. Are you technical? Are you good at marketing? What are your weaknesses? The most important thing is to cover your weaknesses with a solid complementary team. If you aren't technical, get a technical co-founder. If you aren't design savvy, get a design savvy co-founder. I think between 2 to 4 people on the initial founding team makes a lot of sense. And also keep in mind that it's not just your co-founder's hard skills that count, but they should be as determined and as passionate and committed to the idea as you are. So you want to really keep a positive environment and culture. And remember that you guys are going to be in this together for the long run. So before you pitch your potential co-founder for your idea and ask them to come on board, be sure that this is someone who has a great attitude, who's someone you know and you'll get along with, and be comfortable working with for the next few years. So now that you have your brilliant idea, you've created your team around it, it's time to start getting your hands dirty and developing your product. When we were in the initial stages of Stoodle back in the spring of 2012, my team and I would meet once a week after school in the bistro on campus. But we soon realized that the progress we were making was extremely slow and it just wasn't going to work out. But that very summer, we were fortunate enough to get office space in Palo Alto. And we worked out of there every day from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. all summer long, 3 months. And that's when real work gets done. And we've been doing this for the past 2 summers. So the first summer, we worked all summer. We got our 1.0 up and running. Second summer, we went back, revamped the product, got our 2.0 up and live. So if you're considering doing a startup while you're in high school, I highly recommend that you utilize your summers really well, especially because developing your product is an extremely time-consuming stage. So going through it during the school year when you and your other co-founders have a lot of other commitments like classes, everything else, it's just very inefficient. So summer's the way to go. And now you might have heard of the term MVP before. It's an acronym that was really popularized in Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup. It stands for Minimum Viable Product. And what that means is that if you have a grand vision of what you imagine your product to be, hack it down to the smallest level possible and build the most simple, viable version of it first. Sometimes what you might envision your product to be might not be what the consumers really want it to be. So it's best to create that really simple standalone product, release it, get feedback, implement the feedback, iterate, and just repeat until your product's like almost perfect. When we started out with Stoodle, we imagined like this great large-scale online community of high school students helping each other out with homework, like question and answers, and like connecting you with another high school student who knows how to do that homework problem you don't understand. But the first thing we realized is that that was too big and complex of a project to do in just one summer. So the second thing is that what if we put in all those hard work, those hours into that project, and it turns out that nobody ends up using it. So now that entire project just goes to waste. So what we did was we took the smallest unit of this vision that could stand on its own independently, and that's what the startup Stoodle is today. It's an instantaneous collaborative digital classroom that you can launch and share with your friends and teachers to get help from them online in real time. Also, my third point is about pivoting. Don't be afraid to pivot. It happens all the time with startups. If you soon realize that your idea or even part of your idea isn't going to work out, it just doesn't make sense, just accept it and make the necessary change, or just develop a brand new idea on its own. Like, try not to be stubborn and just overly attached to ideas that you come up with. If it doesn't work, just pivot and move on. It's a pretty simple concept. So now this is the real exciting part, launching the product out in the real world, because this is when you get to unveil the product, your creation that you've been putting so many hours of hard work into. And so before you do this, it's actually really good practice to do a beta launch, just so you can clear out most of the bugs before the general public gets their hands on it so you don't look too bad. And this is when the perks of being a high school student comes into play, because you have this wonderful community around you that you can utilize for the beta. In fact, for Stoodle, before we launched it, we did a beta right here at Harker. We have a teacher here, Mr. Stoll, who teaches calculus, who really, and many teachers like him, who really use the product a lot in their classrooms with their students. We got a lot of feedback, a lot of bug reports. We fixed that before we went officially to our launch, which was really helpful. And this is also the turning point in your startup's development, where you start to transition from a developmental mindset to more of an operational mindset. And what this means is that now you have a lot more added responsibilities of customer support and quality assurance testing. And this being said, the real product development starts here, when you'll be constantly receiving feedback from your beta users and incorporating that back into your product. For example, you might get a lot of requests for a particular feature, and you might have to add that in. Or they might think a certain feature is unnecessary. You might have to take that out. Or they might think you can expand and make a current feature even better. Stuff like that, not to mention all the bugs that will come pouring in that you'll have to constantly fix. So it's a really repetitional cycle that you'll have to go through multiple times in order to make your product as perfect as possible. Details really matter at this stage. And so when it comes to funding, people tend to think of funding just as monetary, just as money, basically. And they just get so distracted pursuing money and funding and investors that sometimes they get distracted about what really matters, and that's the product, your company, your vision, and what you're working on. And so in the beginning, I personally was caught up in this trap as well. But I've kind of realized that there are really three kinds of capital. The first one I like to call sweat equity, which is your time. Just the time that you and your co-founders dedicate and put into the company is worth just as much as money. The second is the time and expertise of your advisors and mentors. Find an accomplished person in your space and bring them on your advisory board and just constantly get their thoughts and advice on what you're working on. For Stoodle, we brought in Dr. Paul Kim. He's the CTO of the Stanford Graduate School of Education. And his time that he gave us and his feedback and his thoughts on what we're working on was really, really invaluable. Time equals money. I think that's really key. And last but not least, you definitely do need real money, to pay for server costs or API licensing or whatnot. But so initially, start out with your own money. If you did a summer job, use that, or even approach your family, approach your parents, ask if they would be willing to put in some money just to get you off the ground. But family isn't enough. I had my dad put in some money in his Stoodle initially, and I'm really grateful to him for that. But I soon realized that family isn't enough. You need some sort of outside investor, not just for the purposes of having additional money, but more so for the purpose of having an outside validator, someone that didn't know you at all previously before, who's just in your product and believes in it enough to put in their own money into it. And that looks really good to the outside world, that other people believe in your product, and that's when you know that you're doing something right. It's not just something you've concocted into your head that you think is going to be a wonderful product that everyone's going to use. And at Stoodle, we were fortunate to have the opportunity to pitch Stoodle to Niru Khosla, who's the director of the CK12 Foundation. And she's been kindly funding us since, and we're very, very grateful for that. So now that you've launched your product, how do you get users? How do you get traffic and hits and traction in general? Well, the first thing that you can't do is you can't just buy Google and Facebook ads and just, and just sit back and hope that these ads will run their course and you'll get, your company will lift off. You have to constantly be on your feet, cold calling and emailing people about your product. And sure, a lot of people aren't gonna reply to your emails, and that's perfectly fine. But the small fraction of people that do eventually add up, and that's where it takes you. And who exactly do you go after? You want to go after the influencers of society based on what your company is doing. So at Stoodle, we're an education company. So what we realized is that if we go after the teachers can use Stoodle in their classes. So for every teacher we get 30 additional student users. And that just made perfect sense for us because it was wonderful. So going after influencers just really makes your outreach a lot more efficient rather than targeting one person individually. We also reached out to a bunch of really prominent, popular teacher bloggers. There are a couple of them out there. They blog about all these new educational tools, and they have massive fan bases and follow bases of teachers across the country. So we sent them emails. We got them to do a feature on our product. Unfortunately, they did all positive reviews. So just from those, we got a couple thousand teachers using Stoodle and hearing about it through that. So another thing is that whenever you meet someone, always first introduce yourself and give them your 30-second elevator pitch. Have that ready, and just ask them to check out your product. You should never miss out on an opportunity of doing this because you never know when or how or who they know that can help you out. Just 2 years ago, when Harker had their research symposium, they invited the Sun Microsystems founder, and now he's a venture capitalist, Mehta just on this very stage to give a keynote. And I approached him right after the speech, and I pitched Stoodle to him and asked for his thoughts and advice on it. And what happened after was really interesting. He saw a lot of synergies between what we were doing and what he and his wife, they're running this CK12 Foundation, which is an education foundation. So he saw a lot of synergies between what we were doing and what CK12 was doing. And then so he connected us later to his wife, and we got a meeting set with her. And we went in and we pitched it to her. She loved it. And we talked about how we could work together. And eventually we got funding and office space, and we just took off, basically. And it's just kind of scary to think about that. None of that wouldn't have happened. None of that would have happened if I just didn't take the 2 minutes to come down to the stage and talk to Vinod Khosla after the speech. So you never know who can help, how they can help, who they know. Just go out there, put yourself out, talk to everybody, meet everybody, give your elevator pitch. So now that we've basically gone through all the stages of a startup. I just want to talk about what it's like balancing a startup with going to high school. And this is the really tricky part about it. And I think the most important thing is having the willingness to be misunderstood. As you know, doing a startup is a really major time and energy commitment. And you'll soon realize that you have less time for schoolwork, less time for family, less time for friends. And teachers will think that you're not putting enough effort into their classes as you could be. And like your family, your parents will think that you're becoming more distant. Your friends will think you're less fun. But the fact of the matter is that none of these people will really understand what you're going through. Like even if you try to explain it to them, most of them still won't get it. And that's like truly a crappy situation to be in. But it's true. You just got to deal with it. And you have to understand this before. So if you're thinking about starting a company right now, you need to understand this right now. So you can decide whether this is for you, because I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone. So if you're in to go for this journey, make sure that you're okay with that. You're willing. You have a willingness to be misunderstood. And that being said, you'll have a lot less time for other extracurriculars too, because your startup ends up becoming the extracurricular. I had to drop soccer and like rowing, guitar, and drums, and a bunch of other stuff I was doing just to focus on this. And if you go down this path, you'll have to make a few sacrifices yourself. So before you think about starting a startup, make sure you're okay with that, and you're okay with sacrificing, letting go of some other commitments that you had previously had. I realize this sounds kind of negative and might even deter some of you guys from actually experiencing or experimenting with entrepreneurship at the moment. But that's fine, because like I said, it's better to understand the downside before you just dive head first into something brand new. But overall, I just personally think that all this is a very small price to pay for a chance to change the world and make it a better place. And personally for me, I just think that the struggle is worth it. And the best thing you can do, I guess, if you decide to move forward with this, is just communicate and just over-communicate with everybody around you. Doing a startup doesn't really give you an excuse to just isolate yourself from the world. You should try to make a conscious effort to communicate with your teachers, communicate with your friends, your family, your parents about what you're doing, and at least make an effort to try to help them understand what you're doing, and who knows, you might even form a support network through them, which would be really helpful, rather than just isolating yourself from the world and going through all even bigger struggles. So this concludes my talk. I want to wish you all good luck if you guys decide to start something. And also, feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. It's 14arjunm@students.harker.org. I'm now open to questions.
Okay, so we have a Slido questions right here. One, give us your 30-second elevator pitch. You have 30 seconds sharp starting now.
All right.
I'm kidding. Just go for it.
So Student.org is an online peer-to-peer and teacher-to-student tutoring platform where anyone can teach anyone else from online in real time from anywhere. So it's very powerful. So we have 3 key aspects. We have a digital collaborative whiteboard where you can draw stuff online, whether it's an equation or whatever. You have voice conferencing and text chat. So it's a really comprehensive digital classroom that you just one-click launch, no account needed. Share the URL with your friend. They hop in on the classroom, and boom, the teaching happens. And it's all for free, no ads, no account needed. Thank you.
What do you plan to do with Stoodle as you move into college?
So for one thing, we've kept Stoodle a nonprofit. We thought that everybody deserves a chance to learn as much as they can. And it's a really powerful thing to have someone in the United States teach someone across the world just from their computer. So we wanted to keep it completely nonprofit, completely free. So we have no plans of making major bank and selling it for X number of money. We just want to maximize the social impact that we're creating, and we hope to continue maximizing that when we go to college.
Okay, being a minor and a high school student yourself, how have you dealt with the legal issues of a startup?
Right. So I kind of cheated in that regard. So when we talked to CK12 and Vinod and Khosla, we kind of worked out like this kind of understanding, like sort of agreement, where CK12 would sort of incubate Stoodle under them with the office space and the necessary funding, and we'd sort of become an unofficial subsidiary under them. So all of like the 501c3 nonprofit filing and all the legal work and all the accounting work sort of got routed through them. So we didn't want to deal with that, so we just thought that would be the best way possible, just avoid all that stuff. So yeah, I can't really speak to how, if you guys really want to go the independent route and do it. I haven't had experience with that, but just consult someone who knows.
Okay, where did you advertise your products, and what is your market?
So our market is basically anyone, but more specifically students and teachers. What happens, so there's like two main use case scenarios. Like the first one I outlined in the beginning was like, if you're a student, you're up late at night, you're not getting this homework problem, you go on Facebook, you ask your friend for help. So you just share a Stoodle URL, he opts in. So that's the peer-to-peer use case scenario. Another one that sort of just happened without us intending to be was teachers were starting to use this to sort of do online open office and open online Q&A sessions for their students. So our market are both students and teachers. And like we said, we marketed to like the prominent bloggers.
All right, next question. How did you get funding?
So the funding, like I said, was initially I just talked to my dad. I said, hey, this is something I want to do. And I've got like a few classmates that are really excited about this, as I am, Divya, Hans, and Simmer. And we really want to do this. We could really use some money to get us started. So that was the initial, just to get us off the ground, just to, our hosting fees, server, all that stuff. And then later on, as I said, we went to the Khoslas. And once we got that meeting with her, it's sort of like just pitching to an investor. You want to just be very concise, explain it very well, just the standard stuff. And as luck had it, like she was really impressed with us and our energy and the stuff we wanted to do. And she's also shares a similar vision for social impact, so it kind of blended together very well. And the meeting went really well. And right after that, she said that she'd back us.
Okay, along that vein, how did your parents help you along the process besides just funding?
Right. So fortunately, my dad's an entrepreneur, so he has a lot of key insights about what it takes. And like, fortunately, it also helps me, like, because most parents wouldn't necessarily understand the situation I'm in, especially like if they were a doctor or a lawyer. I guess I'd have to explain it to them more to have them understand what I'm doing. But I'm lucky enough that he understands what I'm going through because he's been through it himself. So he's perfectly fine with me going on this thing. I don't have to try to convince him or anything. And as I said, the financial, and he also, whenever I'm stuck, I need advice, I don't know what to do, I just go to him, I ask him a question, and it's really great to have that back support at home.
Where do you see yourself and Stoodle in 10 years?
In 10 years, well, I'd like to see Stoodle being used by everyone in this room and like in the country. So like I said, we really just want to get because we're doing this all for free, all as a nonprofit, so we just want to get the awareness of this out there, so students who are struggling late at night on Facebook not understanding something they can benefit from here. 10 years from now, I don't know if I'll still be with Stoodle. I might want to start another like social impact thing if this takes off, and just hand the reins over to CK12. But I'm really interested in social impact and using entrepreneurship to do that. So I'll probably be doing something along those lines.
Before Stoodle, have you taken any internships or summer jobs, and did it help you did it inspire you to start Stoodle?
Right. So I didn't have any summer jobs or internships before that because, like I said, I was a sophomore when I started, so I was like new to high school and the internship thing. But back in middle school, I had another sort of experience with entrepreneurship, which was PlaySpan. What that was, it started out as a digital goods marketplace, and I was big into games back then, like RuneScape, World of Warcraft, all that stuff. We all went through that phase. And like what I was doing was, when I went to school, like I'd ask my classmates, like, all right, I'll sell you this sword for like $10 right now in class, and I'd make money off of that. It was pretty cool, and I wanted to make more money. So I heard about like eBay because like I was in middle school back then, so I didn't know too much. I asked my dad, like, is there some sort of eBay for virtual goods, like things that don't really exist? And back then, Zynga didn't exist, so you didn't have like Farmville and like virtual coins and all that. This was before that. And so I was looking for an eBay of virtual digital goods, and he sort of liked that a lot. And he thought that there was potential for a company to be formed around this idea. So he started it, he took it off, and he executed on that pretty well. But it was pretty interesting because as a middle school student, I got to see that an idea that I came up with, just like, as a middle school student, I'm no one. And that, like, over 5 years, like, it turned into like a multi-million-dollar success. And it's just fascinating how just one idea can just transform itself over time into so much value. I got to see just firsthand, like how a company is executed every night when my dad came home. He'd like share everything with me. And sort of based on those experiences of PlaySpan, I applied that with Stoodle and I wanted to execute a startup on my own.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience for Arjun?
Do you see Stoodle as perhaps competing with some of the more traditional centers of learning?
Not exactly. I think I see Stoodle more as a supplementary tool because, I mean, you can't really replace like actual teacher-to-student interaction. It's more of the things, Stoodle's more used for like if you don't understand something in class, then you use Stoodle as a backup with your friends or a teacher or a tutor. That's where I see it as.
Thanks. So you talked about how teachers use Stoodle in the classroom, like while their students are there. So how do they use that?
So they don't necessarily use it in the classroom. I think they use it more outside of the classroom. Like Mr. Stoll, for example, he's a calculus teacher here at Harker. He just does it so if a student's absent, for example, he'll use Stoodle to like talk to them while they're not in class. Or what he does actually is very interesting. For his AP Calc class, he has like a test on Thursday, for example. So what he'll do is he'll send an email out to his students on Wednesday night with the Stoodle URL to the classroom he created. And he'll say, look guys, like I know you're all gonna be studying like late night today for the test tomorrow. So I'll be in this Stoodle class from like 7 to 8 p.m. tonight, and you can pop on in and just ask any last minute questions you might have. And I went and saw it even though I wasn't in that class. It's pretty interesting because like 7 o'clock comes around, everybody joins the class, and everybody's putting up the problems they didn't understand on the board. And Mr. Stoll goes one by one, answering each question using the whiteboard, using the voice conferencing thing. So it's a really powerful tool in that regard for outside of the classroom sort of experiences.
Okay, another round of applause for Arjun. Thank you very much.